Hi, welcome back to the channel and continuing on my Nightmare on Elm Street series of reviews. Today we'll be looking at part 5, The Dream Child. So this one was directed by Stephen Hopkins, who most notably actually also directed Predator 2. And that was something I'd completely forgotten about going into this. He made these two films back to back, which is quite interesting. And I think watching this again, you can kind of see where some of the influence is and some of the kind of crossover in style between those two films. So that was cool. But yeah, made The Dream Child 1 year after The Dream Master. Obviously it was thrust straight into production, given the financial success of part 4. Hugely successful sequel. People really did show up for that. So they wasted no time getting another sequel out. And they take a bit of a different tone with this movie. It's a much darker, more serious film than The Dream Master. And the plot here is continuing on with our character of Alice, with Lisa Wilcox once again playing her. And this takes place a year later. She's now pregnant with Dan's baby. And Freddy Krueger has found a way to come back by basically invading the dreams of her unborn child, and that's how he basically gains the power and influence again to start killing once again the kids of Elm Street. So this sequel is one that I've never really been much of a fan of. I do respect some of the new ideas and the creativity on showing this movie. There are things to appreciate about it, but for some reason the whole thing never really gels for me. It's definitely the most boring of the first 5 films. That's one of the main issues I've found. But something I think about the Dream Child that's a real issue is that it feels like, to me, the amount of creativity they've shoved into this is actually a bit of a cover for how wooden the filmmaking is and the character interactions. But there are some things that I do like about The Dream Child. Following Alice once again is great. I do think she's one of the best characters in the franchise and one of the stronger actors to portray the character. And I do kind of like something about this middle set of films where there was connectivity there. You were directly following the same characters again who had survived the previous, and you're kind of getting back into their story. It helps you get into these films more quickly, I think, rather than trying to set up a new bunch of cannon fodder once again. So I do like that with Alice. I find her very likeable. And as I've said already, there is a lot of creativity on show, and there are scenes which are quite interesting to look at. Like, there is a particular sequence in this film as well that really stands out to me, and that is the scene where Alice's boyfriend Dan gets taken out by Freddy, where he falls asleep at the wheel, and he's dreaming that he's on this motorbike and he's kind of turned into this demon motorcyclist. It's like something out of Mad Max. It looks absolutely insane, like the makeup effects work and everything. And they use this cool effect where they speed everything up, so he's driving out on the highway, and it does give it this very sort of surrealist tone. And it's just a really cool standout sequence. Like, there are certain moments in this film which I'd be happy to watch in isolation. It's just the combination of it all as a coherent movie. It doesn't work so well, but this is definitely one of the standout sequences. But like I've said with the previous sequels, you do have to overcome the contrivances again of getting these kids to fall asleep in more and more ridiculous situations so they can have new creative ways to kill the characters. Like, something about the first few movies is that the struggle feels real. You know, when they're first starting to be tormented by Freddy in their nightmares, and they're starting to have difficulty, staying awake at night. They're drinking coffee, they're taking pills and stuff like that. Believable stuff that teenagers would do in order to stay awake. And eventually it gets the better of them and they're slowly taken out when they've been weakened. Whereas in these later sequels, it's ridiculously convoluted where these characters fall asleep. Like, this example of Dan is a great example where Alice has just called him. He's gone out to go and find her, attend to the situation immediately because she's in trouble. He has no idea at this point that Freddy's back. There's been no hint at the fact that he's struggled with sleep. So he jumps into his truck, and 2 minutes into the journey, he's fast asleep at the wheel. And you're just like, come on now. There's been absolutely no lead up to this whatsoever. So it's certain stupidities like that at this point are so over the top that they're just really difficult to overlook. I do think it's unfortunate as well that Dan is taken out so early, because other than what I've said with Alice being a good character, the rest of the new cast they bring in here as Alice's group of friends at school are rubbish, both in terms of the character writing and the acting. Like the comic book guy in particular, like I can't believe they thought, was that actually like the best actor they could get to play this role? Just really over the top. You know, doesn't feel like a real person to me. Doesn't feel natural. The connection between him and the rest of the friends is just, it doesn't work at all. And that's something that I notice all the way throughout The Dream Child, is when they're not shoving in your face these really over the top trippy visuals and dream sequences, when you actually just have moments where you're getting to know the characters, having scenes of dialogue outside of the dream world, that's where everything really falls apart. Everything is very wooden, it's really stilted, it doesn't have a natural flow about it. There's just a sense of offishness about all of the situations these characters are in, so you can't really connect to the people in this film the same way you can to the previous sequels. And that's even true of The Dream Master as well. You know, despite all its problems, the characters still feel quite real. I still get into them despite the limited screen time with each one, whereas that's really not the case with The Dream Child. They do make some attempts here to dive into some deeper backstory with the character of Freddy Krueger as well, and there are elements of it that are quite interesting, but again, it just comes down to the way it's handled. Like the whole story that they kind of touched on already in Dream Warriors, about his mother having been this nun in this mental asylum and she was raped by all of these maniacs. All this kind of ridiculously over the top stuff to determine the reason that Freddy is the way he is. All this kind of stuff they go back into again here and try and flesh out that story further. And you know, interesting they decided to do that. I guess they had to try and do something else new to bring in some more reasons for us to keep coming back to this franchise. But I wouldn't say any of it is particularly compelling. I've said this previously about the movies, that I think Freddy is better and scary and more interesting the less you know about him. Just giving us vague details makes the whole thing work more. I don't think we need to start going back into the deep backstory of why he was like this. You know, I don't think that stuff really works that well in a sequel this late down the line. And the one other thing that doesn't sit that well with me about The Dream Child is it does have a bit of an unpleasant feel about it. Number one, the fact that it's got all these dark ideas with kind of, you know, invading the nightmares of an unborn baby. So there's lots of body horror related to children and stuff like that. There's also this whole dream sequence where you get to see Freddy as a baby. Just loads of weird, gross out stuff like that it's just not enjoyable to watch. You know, I like gory violence, horror, but the Elm Street films feel like, to me, they're supposed to be quite fun. So when you have teenagers taking on Freddy and they're being taken out, I just much prefer that to this kind of weird direction they go, where it's a mum trying to protect her baby. It's a bit icky, I think, within the context of the world that this franchise is set up in. So I'm not really a particular fan of that. So yeah, this sequel just never really works for me. I do appreciate they were trying new things. They did try to implement some new unique elements. As I say, I liked the character of Alice here as well, going through the situation, but something about the movie overall just doesn't really work to me. I find myself checking out of it. It's quite boring. It's quite dull to get through. I don't think the portrayal of Freddy with Robert Englund is as good as this film. Maybe it is just the case of the directing and the writing being a problem, but it's one of those sequels that every time I get, like now that I'm reviewing the film, and this will be uploaded, I can't imagine I'm going to have much of a reason to want to go back to this one again, ever, out of choice. So kind of interesting to revisit, but not a movie I enjoy. So only going to give this one a 2 out of 5 rating. But guys, do let me know down in the comments, please, what you think of The Dream Child. How do you think this compares to Part 4 as well? These two are often seen as like the real downward spiral in the franchise. I'll be interested to hear how you compare the two. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But thanks so much for watching this video. Do appreciate it as always. Do take care, and I'll see you next time.